What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Meadow Green Farms. So today we're up in the garden doing some fall cleaning on our produce garden. So we have a 40 by 80 foot produce garden, which is completely off-grid. We have no power or water from the house up here. We rely completely on off-grid technologies like solar and rainwater collection to provide everything that this garden needs all year round. So we did a video on this last year where I went through all the nitty-gritty details about how we size the electrical components and how we size the drip irrigation system as well as the solar components. So I will drop a link to that video in the description below if that's something that interests you. We're going to take a walk around the system that you see right behind me real quick, and then I have some questions that people put in the comments from our rainwater collection video on the barn that we put out this spring. So we had a lot of really colorful comments and we had a lot of great questions from people, and not all these questions have just a straightforward, simple answer. So I've written down some of these. We're going to go through those. I'll provide you with multiple answers. Everybody's going to have a different solution depending on their garden or whatever they're trying to set up. So rainwater collection systems, solar collection systems are very flexible by design, and not everybody's going to be the same. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you see what we have set up. If something that you see today does interest you and you want to know more about it, or you want to know where we got the parts, we do have downloadable PDFs on our website. So right here we have high quality PDF documents that go through all the parts and the setup instructions for creating a system like this. So I'll drop a link to that in the description of this video below. Again, click on the link, it'll bring you right to that drawing and you can get yourself one. So let's take a quick spin around this system. I'll show you everything that's going on and then we'll jump into some questions. All right, so we're gonna start at the beginning of this system, and that's going to be the shed roof. So right here we have a 12 by 16 foot shed roof. These are galvanized metal panels. So the water that is coming off this shed roof and into the first flush system is generally pretty clean, because we don't have any trees or anything really around this garden. We are on the top of a hill, and I found last year we had polycarbonate panels up here on the roof, and last year, because it's so windy being on top of a hill, we actually had quite a bit of damage on the polycarbonate panels. So we switched all that out to galvanized this year, and I think it works really well for us. So as the water comes off the roof, it's collected into this aluminum gutter right here and then fed into our first flush system. So the initial cleaning of the water is done by this screen right here. So any bugs, leaves, or big particles will get caught by that. The water actually comes down through this section into this piece of 3-inch PVC right here. So the water will start filling up this piece of PVC, and there's a 2 3/8 plastic ball inside here. When that ball eventually floats up and comes to this neck down point, it will actually choke off the water right here and force the clean water up and out to our IBC totes. I'm going to be talking about this section of pipe in just a little bit because there were some really good questions about what to do with the water in that pipe. But what we have set up on the garden at the bottom is just a ball valve, so we can actually put a gardening can underneath here and just simply collect that water. So the water is fed out of the first flush system and down this pipe right here. I will talk about where this pipe goes in just one moment, but the clean water is going to be forced down here into our two 275 gallon IBC totes. First tank, second tank. This tank right here has an overflow, so if they get full, the water is then forced out and onto the ground out behind our shed. I do get asked a lot about what we do in the winter time about the water freezing in these totes. Right now these valves are open because we're using this system. If it's winter time, the way that I approach it is I close these valves. I actually empty these totes to about 3/4 of the way full. I close these valves and then I drain this entire system dry. And we haven't had any issues with the water expanding or cracking or breaking anything. Once these totes are full, the water is going to come out here into the 2-inch PVC, gets collected by both totes and fed around the corner to this guy right here. So this filter right here is a coarse inline garden hose filter, and I installed this because we are using a diaphragm pump. If you have a diaphragm pump and any piece of hard material or debris happens to get into your system, it makes it down to this point. If you do not have that in place and it gets into your pump, it will kill it immediately if you're using a diaphragm pump. So for a couple extra bucks, you can add yourself a little 3rd stage filtration and put one of these on your system. So coming out of the coarse filter, we have a 10-foot leader hose that runs right over here to our C-Flow 5.5 gallons per minute RV pump. So this is a water pump for RVs. And the way that it operates is when there's a drop in pressure on the outlet side, the pump will actually kick on until the water actually backs up. The pressure backs up when you shut the faucet off or the timer on the irrigation system. These things work really slick. We haven't had any issues whatsoever with them. When we do rainwater collection system on our barn, I'll probably be using one, maybe even two more of these. So we're coming out of here into a Y splitter. I do recommend using brass. We used plastic here a couple times and they just kept breaking, so spent a couple extra bucks and went with brass. This hose right here is going out to our faucet where we can fill up a bucket or a watering can if we want. The second outlet comes down here into an elbow and then into a 25 psi pressure regulator. This right here, if you're not running drip irrigation, is not used. This right here is just protecting the nozzles in our drip irrigation system from blowing out. Right here we have a 130 mesh washable disc filter. So anything that's made it through to this point, again, will get cleaned out by this filter. That way they don't plug our nozzles. And then right out of here, we're going to our garden timer. We have many modes on this, manual. Usually we just set this thing for like 13 minutes when we're up here, but you can set it on a clock if you wish. And then I just have one more shut off right here and a 3/4 inch line going out to our drip irrigation. We do have a faucet on the outside of the shed, and I'll demonstrate this so you can see how the pump works. As soon as I crack this open, the pump is going to kick on. You may or may not hear this. And just like that, the pump shuts off. So we have a 3/4 inch trunk coming out of the shed to the beginning of each one of our garden rows right over here, where it tees off, and we have shutoffs right here. So each row's got its own shutoff, so we can control what rows we do or do not want to water. And then we have two lines with drip irrigation running out on each side of the row. So we have this setup going all the way down our garden, and we have a cap way in the back corner in case we ever want to expand. We also have a 3/4 inch trunk that runs down this row, takes a turn, and feeds these little half rows right over here. Splitting off and having this second little trunk right here has worked out really well. So we have this nice area right in our garden where we can drive in with the tractor with compost or mulch or something, just drop it right here without fear of running over the drip irrigation and ruining it. So each end of the drip irrigation is just capped with a little 1/2 inch cap right here and then a worm clamp. So again, if you're somebody that is looking to set up a drip irrigation system, the description has a link to that video below. There's a lot that goes into drip irrigation. It's not just kind of a one size fits all. So if you want to see how we sized it, check out the link. We go into all the detail for you. All right, so now that we've collected all of our water, we have to get it out to the garden. And earlier I showed you the pump. And one of the reasons that we selected that pump is because it is a 12-volt pump, which we can run off of solar. So when it came time for the solar system, there are plenty of options out there. There are a lot of YouTube videos on different brands of solar systems. But we went with the Renogy 100-watt solar system, which came with this charge controller that you see right behind me. So this guy, it's called a charge controller. It takes the power coming in from the solar panel and it converts it into something that the electronics can use, basically. So you have a couple options with these. It brings in the power. You can bring that power out to a stored capacity like a battery, or you can use that power directly to power some power tools or to power the pump, so long as you have the sunlight. All right, so coming out of the charge controller, we have cabling running up the wall over here to a couple of distribution blocks. We have a positive and negative distribution block, and we went with these so we can feed a series of lights on our garden, as well as have a switch for our pump. So if we're ever up here in the dark, we can simply flip on one of these 12-volt LED lights, and we can do some work in the dark. So we have been able to use these a couple times. We don't usually have to use them, but they have come in handy. If you're somebody that wants the lights on at dark, you can simply not have the switch and put one of these guys in line. This is just a simple 12-volt inline timer. You can set the time on this to whatever you like, and the lights will come on and off when you want. Okay, so there you are, a crash course in the rainwater collection solar system on our garden. Now again, if you want to see the nitty-gritty of this system setup, I'll link that video down in the description below. If you want more detail, I'll put a link down for the barn rainwater collection system that we did this spring. That's going to show you how to plumb everything and how to size your piping and how to kind of calculate the rainwater fall, convert it to how many gallons per hour that you can actually feed into your totes. So with that being said, let's jump into some questions that we had on that particular video. Again, we had a lot of questions. I'm going to pick just a handful of them and try to make a really broad answer and give you guys some background information. The first question was the UV tote covers. Everybody wanted to know what they were and where we got them. They're UV covers. They keep UV light out of the IBC totes. There are a ton of places that you can get them. If you just Google or go on Amazon and type in IBC tote cover, you're going to come up with a laundry list of different brands at different price points. So go ahead and pick your poison there. What I wanted to talk about though is that those are not the only solution. If you saw in the beginning of this video, these totes in our garden are actually wrapped in black plastic. If you choose to go this way, it's a little bit cheaper, but it's a little bit more time consuming. You have to actually take the plastic tote out of the cage. You can wrap it in black plastic like we did and tape it up, or you can get yourself like a 2-in-1 spray paint. Make sure it's got a primer. Make sure that the plastic tote is very clean and dry, and you can go ahead and paint those totes. I'm not sure how long that lasts outside in the UV light. I've seen it done by many people on YouTube. You can check out those videos if you like below. If your totes are outside and exposed to direct sunlight, you absolutely want to make sure that you cover them in some way, shape, or form. Even if they're in indirect sunlight, as these totes are. These totes don't see sunlight no matter what time of day or what season it is. But we cover them, we keep them completely protected from UV light. If there gets to be any algae whatsoever in these totes, it will be a really bad situation because it's a lot of work to take these totes apart and clean them out and everything. So do yourself a favor, spend the money up front, make sure they're protected. Next question was, what are some options for venting the totes, and do you have to vent the totes? So second part of that question is, yes, you have to vent the totes. If you don't, you can collapse the totes. When water is filling the totes, you have to displace that air somewhere. So if the totes aren't cracked, you're not going to be displacing that air, and you might not save all the water that you want. When you're extracting the water from the totes, if you don't vent the totes, you can actually collapse them. I've done it before on the tote that we actually used to haul water around. I forgot to take the tote cover off and open up the valve, started emptying it, and all the sides kind of collapsed a little bit. Wasn't a big situation because it's just gravity feeding, so there's only so much collapsing the tote can do. But if you're using a pump, you can probably do some damage or hurt something when the tote collapses. So make sure you vent it. How to vent it? I choose to use a piece of 2-inch PVC coming out of the top of one of the adjacent totes and just flow that right onto the ground, or kind of push it away to wherever you want. You can collect it somewhere else if you want, maybe like a pond or something like that if you like. If you don't want to do that, you can just leave the tote cover off. You can unscrew the cap or just leave it off the tote completely. Sometimes you can find on Amazon a 6-inch PVC tote that has actually 2 threaded MPT holes coming out of it, and you can just put a straight vent stack coming up out of the tote cover and do it that way. So good question. Have we had any issues using the rubber flex couplings on the front of the totes? Another question that came up a lot. No, we haven't. We have 3 totes that are in the sunlight in 100-degree weather down here in Tennessee all summer long. I have 3 rubber couplings on the front of the totes. That way I can take that whole front section of pipe off and clean it. Or if something breaks or leaks, I can perform some maintenance on it. We have not had any issues whatsoever with those rubber couplings. And I think that is, if you have 2 pieces of pipe coming together and they're not close, and you have a lot of rubber of that coupling exposed, you might run into an issue. But these totes, it's actually pipe against pipe, and then the rubber coupling is just over there creating a seal. So that would be my recommendation if you go that route. But we have not had any issues whatsoever with them leaking or bursting or anything like that. Be careful or the downpipe will become septic. Yes, and actually when we first set up this system, that was something that we found out pretty quick, is that if you do not empty that first flush system, that water will start to go septic. It starts to stink really bad. So that's not a good situation. And if you saw in the beginning of the video, you'll notice on our first flush systems that we actually have a 3-inch rubber coupling on there right at the bottom, and that's so I can actually take that coupling apart, pull the bottom off, and clean that pipe if I need to. Now, to avoid this, what you do is you can either put a ball valve like we have at the bottom of the first flush and use that water right after every time it rains. You can crack that ball valve open just enough so that the water drips or slowly seeps out of there. That way it's seeping out slower than it's coming in. You're still going to collect that water, but over time it will drain. They also do sell like little drip irrigation fittings that you can drill and thread into like a PVC pipe cap. put one of those right at the bottom and it will perform the same function. But do make sure you empty it. It will become septic. It's disgusting. And if you're using this water for animals, it can be very dangerous. So the last question I got was, what do we do when we run out of water in these totes? Which is a great question. And the answer is I have another tote that we use to cart water around. I fill it about halfway up with water from the house, because that's about as much as my tractor can lift. We bring that all the way up from the house and we dump it into these totes. The totes that are on the barn, we ran dry about 2 weeks ago. I basically just lift it up with the tractor, come over with a piece of pipe with a 90-degree elbow, and I open the valve and it's dropped the water right into the cap on one of the totes, and we refill them that way. For the garden, that's what this pipe is right here. This 2-inch pipe goes to the outside of the shed. I basically just come up to that with the tote. It's kind of like watching an aircraft get refueled. I come up to that pipe from the outside with the tote, I dock it to the IBC tote, and then I just open the valve and fill these tanks. So we have had to fill these totes. Unfortunately, with the garden only having 2 totes, it ran dry about 2 weeks ago. I had to supplement these totes twice with about probably 200 gallons of water, and the ones on the barn probably would not have run dry. They've been watering or providing water for our pigs and our chickens all year long. It's worked out really well. If I hadn't have left the valve that fills our pigs' water open about a month and a half ago, we probably would have had plenty of water, but I did that, and the next morning we were completely dry, so we just never recovered. But that's all right. I guess everybody makes mistakes. We are going to be setting up a third one of these systems, hopefully in the spring. So we're going to be adding on more rainwater collection in the barn this spring. We're going to do that system a little bit separately. So what we're going to do on that system is I'm going to do 3 totes. We're going to have propane. We're going to have an instant hot water heater. We're going to have a sink. We're going to do a bunch of plumbing, as well as some more rainwater collection. So if that's something that interests you, make sure you hit the subscribe button. You're not going to miss that. If you did like the information in this video, hit the like button. It does help us out a lot, and we really do appreciate it. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. I'll be sure to get back to you. I hope you guys enjoyed this walkthrough. Until next time, I hope you have a great day.